It's 11:05 on WSIC on Club WSIC News.
We're
Here with
dancing.
We're Just Saying. Normally with Senator Vickie Sawyer and David, but Senator Sawyer is out this week, so we actually have a special guest here. But if you'd like to be part of our show, 844 Studio 4 is our number. We are streaming online on the WSIC News Facebook page and on YouTube. And we have with us today from the McIntosh Law Firm, Cornelius Attorney Extraordinaire, Larry Shaheen, deep political operative, consultant to
Lord.
all of the leaders of North Carolina and around the country. Larry, how you doing?
I'm doing well, David. It's always a pleasure to be here. I mean, I'm not as pretty as Vickie.
Well,
but at
no,
least I can at least talk into the microphone.
Well, exactly. Well, to be fair, I am prettier than Vickie.
Oh,
and so, I need something has to offset. So
She heard that. She heard that wherever she is.
I can feel the gaze right now. This may be my swan song here.
I love it.
This show. But
I love it.
It is great to have you here.
No, it's a pleasure to be here.
In the dog days of summer, so to speak, definitely sports wise, but not politics wise. There is a ton going on nationally, statewide, locally. Some big fundraising numbers came out this week from a lot of different, but starting sort of at the national, right? I think we're up to 234 Republicans that have announced for the presidency at this point. I feel like that the guy that lives next door to me is soon to announce his candidacy. But with so many people coming in and everything like that, fundraising obviously is the gauge of where the support lies, right? So nationally, what are we seeing in your mind nationally? Obviously there's some big fundraising numbers. Trump has it, DeSantis has it. But how do you see these things stacking up right now as we go through the summer?
Well, we're looking at a lot of these candidates, and a lot of what you're seeing is a lot of these fundraising numbers that are carrying over. And it's important to remember that modern campaigns have changed. It used to be that a lot of the corporate money would go into the parties, and the parties would be where that soft money kind of existed. Now, with the advent of nonprofits and these 501c4 organizations that were created in the wake of Citizens United, you've now got a lot of these actual organizations that are associated with the candidate but not working directly in coordination with the candidate. So these new actual nonprofits are coming out and they're raising money, and there's no limits. It's completely no limit. You can get it from corporate, you can get it from individuals. You can get it in any amount of money. You can get it in $1 all the way up to $1 billion. It's no limit whatsoever. So you've got a couple of these groups that have raised significant amounts. I know that former President Trump's group, he's raised a lot of money into his own campaign, but he's also raising into his own super PAC. Interestingly enough, it was reported that the super PAC paid Melania $155,000 to go speak somewhere just the other day, and it was like,
I'm sure that it was well worth it.
Well worth it. But I mean, you're talking about the way those are operating, and I know that Governor DeSantis, and you got to give a lot of credit to Governor DeSantis in terms of how he's operating. He came into North Carolina and was actually at the GOP convention. I was at the GOP convention a couple of weeks ago. And he had a super PAC there that was participating and had a lot of legislators at a small reception. And I got the opportunity to be there. And it was really great to see how he, instead of trying to go after donors and make this a donors group, he really went after the local legislators. And it was really interesting to see how he did that, because he hired a really great local group, the Differentiators, which I think Jim Blaine, Ray Martin, and Zach Allman. They came in and helped manage that, did a great job for that, and then they've stuck around. And I know that the National Super PAC has done a lot of walking already in North Carolina. Folks in Raleigh were already showing me door hangers. I mean, they're already hanging doors.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they're out walking. They've got a ton of people in Iowa right now walking doors. They've got a ton of people running around New Hampshire walking doors. The Super PAC has taken on the traditional role of the campaign. Here's why: because when a Super PAC goes to buy TV, they have to pay 5 or 6 times the amount of what a normal campaign pays, because by law, you have to pay into a television station the lowest possible rate if you're a campaign. If you're a super PAC, they don't have the same rule. So they wind up paying 5 or 6 times more than what the campaign would pay for TV. So in reality, it makes more sense to keep all of the expenses that are the same between the super PAC and the campaign on the super PAC side, and then everything that's going to be lower for the campaign, you want to spend out of the campaign. So you want to spend as much TV as possible out of the campaign, and then maybe augment that with the super PAC. But that you can't coordinate, so it takes very competent and talented staff to be able to do that. I know that Tim Scott is sitting on a $21 million campaign chest just from his Senate run. He did have a good Senate campaign.
Now, how much of that can transfer over? Is it
all of it? Every dollar.
So federal to federal?
Federal to federal is no limit. Federal to state, you cannot do that. So say, for example, if one of our locals who wanted to run for Congress, their state campaign cannot transfer up to the federal, nor can the federal transfer down to the state. Like, there was a rumor that Senator Tillis was going to run for governor. It was never going to happen, but of course people love to spread rumors. That was never going to happen because all the money Tom has raised doesn't get to come back to if he runs for governor. So those types of things are important to remember. And I think to a certain extent, when you're dealing with how those people raise money, it's really different. It's all completely changed. So those national folks, we're going to see a lot more of the national folks. You'll see a lot of Tim Scott. I know he was in town 2 weeks ago. Governor DeSantis will be in town here soon, I'm certain. You've got President Trump, who's come through town several times. They were all at the convention. Those campaigns are ongoing. And interestingly enough, with the nationalization of our political environment, you've got these national campaigns that are going to be driving the tickets throughout North Carolina. So it's going to be more focused on the top of the ticket and then how that transfers down the ballot. So as we move down the ballot, that's going to be very interesting to see how these other candidates are able to take their money in, differentiate between the national actual top of the ticket, because there's concerns that if President Trump's top of the ticket, we're going to wind up with a problem. And if we have Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, those are the four. I don't think there's anyone other than those four who could really possibly take the nomination at this point. So if it's one of those other three, other than President Trump, you see less of an erosion in the suburban environments. If it's President Trump, you're going to see the rurals max out. They're going to go bright, 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 like white red. The suburban crews, you're going to see a lot more of that fall off. Cabarrus County is a perfect example of that. But I mean, when you're talking about all that, it's so important to understand the political ecosystem and how the fundraising numbers work. And it's important that, you got a lot of Democrats and left-leaning folks, and folks are like, well, I don't understand why there's money in politics. Why is there money in business? Why is there money in anything? Money makes it all work. And it's funny when I hear business people say, well, I don't want to get involved in politics. Well, let me make this clear. It's going to be involved in you.
Yeah.
It's going to come and regulate your business one of these days. So you're either going to be at the table, you're going to be on the menu. I prefer to be at the table. And if that means I have to spend a little bit more to be at the table, then I'm willing to do that because it's important that we have good policy.
Absolutely, 100%. And so you don't see, and I agree with your assessment, Trump, DeSantis, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, feel like those are the odds-ons, especially because of the fundraising chops and things like that. Don't see a pathway for a Mike Pence.
No,
just don't see that happening.
No, Mike Pence did the right thing the day of the count of the vote, and he's going to pay for it. Though there was a great interaction he had in Iowa. You know this rule. You've run campaigns. The minute you start explaining,
you're losing.
You're losing, and he's explaining. He's explaining consistently in Iowa. He's complaining in New Hampshire. He's explaining in South Carolina. People may respect his decision. People may like his decision. He's gonna pay for that decision when it comes ultimately down to the time for when he has to actually get elected.
No, absolutely. So, and then we have the also rans up through the 21s. Vivek Ramaswamy is getting a lot of traction on social media. Articulate guy, smart guy. Didn't even realize he had run before. I missed that part.
Everybody missed that.
I missed that the last time around. But I really feel like that it's going to be interesting to see sort of how these things shake out. But I do agree those are the four where I feel like you're going to end up seeing some differentiation, some separation. So tell me just real quick, if you were going to handicap this, right? I think the schedule still remains Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina.
Yep.
Coming out of those three, who in your mind is the one who comes out the best after? So let's take it all the way to South Carolina. After those three, who's still left? Who's still viable?
I think all four. I think all four of them are probably going to be still viable. The question is South Carolina. The question is going to be, what in the world happens with Tim Scott and Nikki Haley? Because we've seen this before where you've got two people from the same state, they're going to split the vote, and then you're going to wind up having this entire situation where then it's what is Trump's 30 going to beat the split, and then you're going to wind up with a way for DeSantis to come through and have more than 30.
Exactly. You're listening to We're Just Saying on WSIC News. We will be back after the break. Welcome back to We're Just Saying on WSIC News Radio with David and Larry Shaheen today. Senator Sawyer is out on a well-earned break. If you'd like to be part of our show, 844 Studio 4. And we are taking calls. We're also streaming live on the WSIC News Facebook page and on YouTube. And quick shout out to Chamber President Bill Russell.
Bill Russell, apparently he's listening.
He's listening and or potentially watching. I mean, listening,
Bill,
great.
I would
watching,
hate for him to be watching it. I mean, crack his TV. I mean, his screen. Bill, listen to it. For
I know, right? Like Larry and I are the very definition of the faces for radio.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right.
But Larry, we were talking fundraising before the break, and at the national level and what we see, at North Carolina, really, we have a situation where right now on the Democratic side, Josh Stein is the heir apparent. There's been rumors that there may be another person jump in at some point, but right now he is the guy. Yep. On the Republican side, obviously we have Mark Robinson and Dale Folwell,
and Mark Walker.
And Mark Walker. And so from a
he's
fundraising
forgettable,
standpoint,
but you gotta mention it.
Yeah, and I do apologize. I had forgotten.
You actually had forgotten.
I actually had forgotten.
It's all right. This will be his third time in a row. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, maybe third time could be the charm.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
I doubt it.
Yeah, we got to throw it out there.
You
never know. You never know.
Throw it out there.
You never know. But on the state level, sort of, what are we seeing right now in terms of obviously Josh Stein has no opponent really right now, so he's raising and really fairly uncontested right now.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's interesting because when you're dealing with what's going on with governor, first time since 2012, you've got an open seat, right? Last time, let's go through the history on that because it's important to remember the history. 2012, you got McCrory running against Walter Dalton. The only reason that happened is because Bev Perdue was going to go to jail. She stayed governor. So, I mean, Bev Perdue went away, and Walter Dalton, who's lieutenant governor, stood up and said, okay, well, we're going to do this. Well, Pat McCrory at that point had basically been proven right about everything. So the man raised $2 million out of Mecklenburg County. I mean, he went out and just killed it. And it was a great campaign. But, I mean, he really wasn't running against somebody because Walter Dalton was not a real opponent. I mean, Walter tried, but he got his butt whipped.
And let's just look caveat, $2 million for a Republican out of Mecklenburg County.
Oh, he won Mecklenburg County.
Yeah, and
he won it.
I mean, a Republican couldn't raise $2.50 out of Mecklenburg County at this point in time. So let's make sure we understand how awesome that was.
It was amazing. We're trying. We're never going to raise that again, I don't think. But I mean, we're doing our best, and we do have some folks out of Mecklenburg that are willing to give. But that was an insane number. But then in 2016, you got HB2. You got the toll road. You got Wilmington's film issues. You got a bunch of other stuff. All on top of the fact that it's Roy Cooper, who is their last saving white knight, which is what he was. He came in on the white horse, coming in as Attorney General since 2000, wanted to run, raised $30 million, won by 12,000 votes. Of course, 10 of those came from Durham at the last minute, but we can call it what it is. But I mean, that's what happened. And then 2020, you got Dan Forrest. Okay, I love Dan. You love Dan.
Yep.
We all love Dan.
Absolutely.
Hal Weatherman just did not do a good job on that race. Dan Weatherman, for those of you who don't know, was campaign manager on that one. Hal misread the COVID situation. The campaign was focused too much on grassroots when he doesn't realize that the governor's race for this state is not a grassroots-based campaign. There was very little coordination with the RGA, and it was really poorly run. So, I mean, you got a situation where Dan, unfortunately, was taking some bad counsel and wound up getting trounced. I mean, it was really, really unfortunate. And then ultimately, now you come to 2020, right? 2024. Mark Robinson and Josh Stein will participate in what will be the most expensive governor's race in the country. There is no question about that. We know the RGA is targeting this race. We know the DGA is targeting this race. Stein just reported having raised $11 million, $8 million of it cash that he's holding. Mark Robinson raised $2 million. He has $3 million cash on hand. That's good because he didn't show his burn rate had been higher up to that point, and it is a historic number. No governor's candidate to this point in the first half of the off year of a 2-year cycle had been able to raise that. So Robinson looks in a good spot. I love Dale Folwell to death, and I think that he's a fantastic treasurer. He is committed to run for governor. He's going to have to find a business niche. He's going to have to get a lot of people to be able to raise a lot of money for him to be able to compete in that primary. I've told him that much. If he does, he'll have a chance, and if he doesn't, he won't. And then Mark Walker's just going to continue to run around and continue the grift that he was doing during the Senate race, where he was trying to get people to give him money, and it didn't go anywhere because Mark Walker has no idea what he's doing. So ultimately, you're going to see Mark Walker win in that also ran kind of a category. So ultimately, it's going to come down to Folwell and Robinson and whether or not the Republican Party chooses one of those two. And I have a feeling, based on the polling, it's probably going to end up being Mark Robinson. But again, with the advent of super PACs and the advent of these kind of organizations that can raise unlimited amounts of money, you never know.
So talk to me a little bit, why the disparity between Josh Stein's number and Mark Robinson's number? Is it simply because Josh doesn't have a primary right now? Is it people want to get in early to make sure he doesn't have a primary? Is it, hey, let's get it out there now to scare off like that? I mean, there's a fairly wide, so even significant. Why is that?
That is a function primarily of the sophistication nationally of how Democrats are able to raise money. A lot of Josh's funding did come from in-state, but a good big chunk of it came from out of state. And the thing that I'll tell you, and the thing that's ultimately the Republicans have got to fix this, is that the Democrats will go to Martha's Vineyard, they'll go to New York, they'll go to D.C., they'll go to Los Angeles, they'll go to Seattle, they'll go to all these places where there's little pockets of money, and then they will wind up doing everything they can to suck that area dry. Act Blue, now there's been an interesting investigation into Act Blue recently, but Act Blue is an aggregator that's aggregating donations from Democrats all over the country into these competitive races. And it's allowed them to be able to raise ungodly amounts of money. But it hasn't really been used well, because while Democrats do a great job of raising money and making it seem like they know what they're doing, in reality, there's only one consultant in all of North Carolina from the Democrats, and that's Morgan Jackson, who actually does know what he's doing. There's some good locals, but there's nobody else at the state level. So what they'll do is they'll import these guys from out of state who get paid an ungodly amount of money to lose. That's exactly what happened in the last Senate race. I mean, it was an absolute joke. But at the end of the day, the Republicans with Win Red have tried to kind of copy Act Blue, but the disparity between Stein and Robinson is attributable to the fundraising organization of the Democrats, the sophistication of their digital platforms to be able to aggregate funds from all over the country, and lastly, and this is the most important one, Josh Stein's history. Let's talk about that for a minute. Josh Stein's father, Adam Stein, Chambers Ferguson Stein, first law firm in the state that was a mixed law firm, African Americans, and Adam was Jewish. They did great work for civil rights. No one's going to dispute that. You know, they really, really did. Based out of Chapel Hill, had an office here in Charlotte. Josh comes from that. That is who he comes from. He is not a dislikable individual. He is actually very personable. He's been there a while. Yeah. He's been the AG for a while. He's been proven. His family is deeply rooted in the state. He is as liberal as the day is long. The man is further left than Harvard, but you don't hate him, right?
Yeah.
That's why he's dangerous.
Yeah.
He's like Jeff Jackson, right? Mm-hmm. He's dangerous, and that's why he has to get beaten. But the problem is that he's going to go out there and raise money. He's going to have more money than anyone knows. But I guarantee you he will have $40 million raised by the end of this campaign. So the Republicans, and this is where I tell business leaders, and Bill, you better be listening to me because I'm talking to your members. They need to give.
Yes.
They need to give. We need people to open their checkbooks and understand that tithing to your church just doesn't do it anymore. You got to put 10, 20% of what the Lord has given you back into fighting the fight. Because we're not just fighting. This isn't fiscal policy anymore. This isn't just, we're not just talking about, international relations anymore. We're talking about the mutilation of children. Mm-hmm. With this transgender nonsense. We're talking about our school systems, which frankly in Mecklenburg County went from, in 2012 was awarded the Broad Prize, the best urban school district in the country, has now reached a situation where less than 50% of their students are proficient in math. Okay? That's not acceptable. And if you're a business owner and you were worried about the future of your business, the number one issue you should be concerned about is your school system. Now, we're looking at the General Assembly doing a lot of privatization. We're looking at the General Assembly making strides in that. But the problem continues to be that we have got to get people elected statewide who are going to continue to move forward with the policies that we know work. You look at Florida, you look at Texas, you look at any of these other policies. We just got named the #1 state for business. That's not because of Governor Cooper. No, he has vetoed every good thing that the General Assembly has wanted to get done. And when you're talking about being able to make this the best state for business, it's all because of the General Assembly. Speaker Tillis, who's now Senator Tillis, Speaker Moore, Senator Berger, and their caucuses. Without them, this state continues to be where it was, which was 44th in the nation in tax climate, and at the time was the worst state for business in the entire Southeast, the number 9 or 10 state. So when you're faced with a decision, and look, Mark Robinson has his flaws. Yes, he does. But that does not mean that he will not make a good governor so long as he is well consulted by the business community. And again, this is where the business community has to start being willing to step up and take a leadership role.
No, 100%. And I think one of the things that we find when we talk about these races and everything like that, I mean, people, I think sometimes will forget, prior to the lieutenant governor race, Mark Robinson he came from nowhere.
He was a YouTube star.
He was a YouTube star.
Yeah,
He came from nowhere.
He came from nowhere.
He came from nowhere, but he was someone who went out and, goes into meetings. He sits down with people and everything like that. Amazing public speaker.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, amazing public speaker, gives a message that resonates, especially in the climate that you mentioned earlier, with transgenderism, our schools, things like that. He has a message that resonates,
Yes.
and that took him into the lieutenant governor spot. That put him into the top spot right now for governor. And so, but like you said, going out into those places, talking, getting the message out is only one aspect of it. When you come to governor of North Carolina, you are in the big leagues.
That's right.
You are the major leagues, and then you are talking media, you are talking mailers, and you are talking money, the 3 M's. Those are the things that you have got to, and then, polling, but that's sort of, that's
yeah, but the polling comes into it. I mean, you're talking, when you're, think about it this way. Think about it this way, Dave. Last time there was a competitive race, I think this total spend between both candidates was around $60 million. If the governor's race in this state does not cost $100 million, I'll be shocked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had the Senate race with Tillis. I mean,
$220 million.
$220 million.
I mean, can you believe it? Can you believe it? And that's the thing, is that, like, it can't all come from outside the state.
Right.
Because that's where it's coming from right now. And we're being dictated a lot of what's happening by outside the state. We've got to do better.
No, 100%. You're listening to We're Just Saying on WSIC News. We'll be right back. Larry Shaheen and David Coble. If you're just now joining us, Senator Sawyer is on a well-deserved vacation. Like to be part of our show, 844-STUDIO-4 is the number, and we are streaming live on the WSIC News Facebook page as well as YouTube. So I feel like we're in Groundhog Day, Larry, because budget here in North Carolina right now in what had originally seemed like after a marathon budget last session that took us all the way to November, we felt like, hey, you know what, in this short session time frame, it's going to come out quick. We're going to be out. I was hearing, man, we're going to be out by 1st of July. July 4th it was. Yeah, no. And now it's just like, yeah, maybe not so much. Maybe August, maybe September, maybe October. We don't know.
I better not be October.
I really hope not. But, you know, obviously right now, I mean, you know, my understanding is most of the major things, most of the big things have worked out, but we really sort of have centered in on two items that the Senate and the House are really trying to come to an agreement on. But one of the questions I always get asked, and as a political sort of observer here in North Carolina for as long as you have been, it's interesting because we have a full Republican majority, super majority inside the legislature. Why can't Republicans get together on a budget?
Well, you know what's funny about that? I'm going to tell you a wonderful story, and this came from Senator Tom Apodaca. It's one of his favorite sayings. You know, he was taking a new senator around, and a new senator told me the story. I thought it was hilarious. You know, you're going around, you're going through the General Assembly, you're walking through the building, you get into the Senate chamber, and he says, "Now here, my friend, those Democrats over there, you know, they're the opposition. You see that chamber across the way? That's the House." They're the enemy. they're the ones trying to screw up everything we're trying to do. And it's funny because it's not just him. You know, there was a United States senator who said the same thing. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah, because I think Majority Leader Bell said it best. All the Democrats complaining about a budget. His response to them was, "Well, good. You want us to let the Senate get everything they want, and then we can go home, right?" And then all of a sudden, you hear all these Democrats, "Well, wait. We don't want that." So, I mean, there are some genuine disagreements on policy, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Unlike the Washington Democrats and Republicans, if you don't get a budget, you shut the government down. Well, that's not the case here. We now have, with the passage of a bill, I want to say it was about 14 years. No, when was it? It was 6 years ago, I think. Senator Berger, and at that time, I think it was Speaker Tillis, passed a bill that said that if we don't get a budget by the end of the biennium, the budget just continues at the levels at which we agreed. So this has been the one because Governor Cooper and the Democrats, let's keep this in mind. He has never approved a budget ever, except for this last one. He has never approved a budget. He has vetoed every budget.
And correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't really sign it. He just let it sit and become He let it sit in the desk for 10 days.
Sit in the desk for 10 days. He's never once approved a budget. So he's never once signed his name on the dotted line for teacher pay raises. He's never once signed his name on the bottom line for tax relief. He's never once signed his name on the bottom line for increased transportation spending. He has consistently been the problem with budgets in this state. Teachers would have had and this was the number that they added up, if he had passed the budgets passed by the General Assembly, teachers at this point would have been 20% higher in pay raises than they were because you had to keep going back to where they were at the time. So now there's another pay raise, a bunch of pay raises in here. Now, he wants to sign this budget because Medicaid expansion is in it. But I mean, to a certain extent, you know, it's interesting to me. You and I were talking earlier about hypocrites. There is no bigger bunch of hypocrites in this state than the North Carolina Democrats. Because, and I love my Democratic friends to death. You know, they mean the world to me on some issues, and we agree on a lot of things. But there are times when I will literally sit there, look them in the face, and I'm going to say, do you care about the people of this state, or do you just care about being in charge? Because you care about the people of the state, you're going to work with us. But if you don't care about the people of this state, then you're just going to keep opposing everything we're doing. That #1 business ranking didn't just happen out of thin air. You know, a lot of these issues that we're seeing, people moving to North Carolina, people locating in North Carolina, people talk about affordable housing all the time. Let's be clear. That's a problem of having too many people in the state who want to live here, work here, raise a family here because of the policies that were created from 2011 on. So when you're dealing with those issues and you're looking at the budget and you're having a conversation about the budget, the question is, how much do you spend? How much do you cut? Where does the money go? And there's some big ticket items that I know they're having disagreements about. But because of the genius of our leadership over the last 10 years, the budget continues. The government doesn't shut down. They can continue to have those conversations. And if I'm a Republican and I say, oh, wait, I get no spending for a couple of months and no spending increases for a couple of months while we sort this out, man, I really don't have a problem with that. I have no problem with that. So, I mean, to a certain extent, that's where you get to this issue of a lot of people are complaining there's no budget. It doesn't mean a darn thing because people, average everyday people, they aren't going to see the budget not being enacted.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think one of the things, and you mentioned, the number of things that go into the budget, and the transportation funding is always sort of the big items that go in there. I think that the General Assembly has done a really good job of trying to get NCDOT back on track over the last few years. But, in our area alone, right, and you and I live it every single day, right, in our area alone, between exit 28 and exit 36, traffic is a way of life, and it's just not going anywhere. Mooresville recently, I saw the fastest growing city or a town in North Carolina, and so which if you've been here for a while, you're like, seriously, the fastest growing. But when you have, and I will give kudos.
It's just because they don't want to go to Davidson. They have no interest in being in Davidson. They want to be in Iredell. Well,
and if we're going to be fair, the people in Davidson have no interest in them being there either.
No, they don't.
So it's a symbiotic relationship there.
Bunch of liberals. What a shock!
Like exit 30 could probably close, and people in Davidson would be fine. But as you go up that corridor, right, I give kudos to the leadership through here who have implemented a quality of life for the businesses that have located here. Growth and traffic are an offshoot of enormous success.
That's right.
And there's something to that.
Yep.
But that transportation funding that comes through the state budget, from Highway 150 widening to Highway 21 widenings to I-70, additional lanes on 77, all in potholes, for goodness sake.
Yep.
All the things that go into that. Every area of the state has to get transportation funding. I know Senator Sawyer being chair of the transportation committee inside.
Well, she's done a wonderful job.
She's done a fantastic job, and one of her key things has been looking at a new funding model for how because the gas tax just doesn't cut it.
It's not gonna, and it's not going to cut it if we keep doing all these EVs.
Exactly, the EVs don't. The higher gas mile, getting more miles to the gallon was great at the pump, but it lowered your road
all of our revenue.
Yeah,
we got to fix the roads.
Exactly, we got to fix the roads. So that's one of the key things that I know is part of this entire process. But let me ask you something. Like you talk to a lot of people in Raleigh, have a lot of conversations. Your instinct about from a budget standpoint, are we going to get a budget, or are we going to slide into just continuing last year?
We'll absolutely get a budget. I'm not concerned about that. At some point or another, they're going to want to go home.
Yeah,
that's always been. At some point or another, they doesn't want to go home. Now, last time they didn't have the veto-proof majorities, so this is a simple question. I think what they're arguing about now are issues. Once those issues are done, it won't be a simple issue. It won't be as hard as going to a senator or a House member and saying, we need you to flop and vote for this. Because that's what they did. They got the senator from Cumberland County who was willing to, of course, when he did that, he then got primaried and got away, which of course was funny because Val Applewhite, who replaced Kirk DeVere, wound up voting for the transgender bill, which was, God, that's just the women in sports. It was the women in sports bill.
Yeah.
It was Vickie's bill.
Yeah.
It was Senator Sawyer's bill. And she votes for it. And you just the gnashing of teeth and all that. It's just so nasty. So if it was the same where there were 29 senators in the Republican caucus, we were having to flip one, or there were 71 in the House caucus, we were having to flip one, I'd say, well, maybe not. We will have a budget. Yeah. It's not an issue of if. It's a question of when.
And earlier this year to ultimately get us the super majority, Trish Cotham, moved over and everything. Absolutely, who has done a real good job, representing honestly her area in the state. It has a real state focus on there. But you mentioned the switching of parties and the wailing of gnashing of teeth that happened. Then I joked then that it's amazing that we've had Republicans switch to Democrats. You didn't see the degree of angst on that. It was like, oh well, okay, thing of conscience. Trisha Cotham does it, and you would think the world is in it, right? Like Democrats were like, yes, you can switch your gender, but don't you switch your party.
Different when Democrats do it, David. You know that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it means right there when Democrats do it. But let me ask you, just sort of finally coming out, any big items that you're focused on as far as this agenda or budget goes?
No, I just want them to. I want to see a good tax package.
Yep, absolutely. You are listening to WSIC News Radio. We'll be right back. That one messed me up. I gotta tell you, man.
These
I love
new
this bumper
bumpers are
music.
good.
It's fantastic.
This is
good. You're listening to We're Just Saying on WSIC News Radio with David Coble, Larry Shaheen, filling in for Senator Sawyer, who is on a vacation. If you'd like to be part of our show, 844-STUDIO-4. We're also streaming live on the WSIC News Facebook page and on YouTube. So we sort of delved a little bit into local just before the break. A lot of election filing going on right now. Started Friday of last week. It is open, and the barn door, once the barn door was opened, everything came flooded out. So a lot of different races that have been going. So obviously here in Cornelius, a number of candidate filings of late, and obviously you are heavily invested inside the Cornelius area. So talk a little bit about local candidates and broader Mecklenburg County.
Well, let's talk through real quick. You got school board at large. That's a nonpartisan race here in Mecklenburg County. So you've already got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people filed. We'll see what happens. Those are always, it's an interesting race because I don't think anybody ever wins that with more than 30-40% of the total. So that's not going to happen. You got Vi Lyles, who's filed for mayor. She's going to win. There's no question on that. You've got Charlotte City Council at large. You got 2 people. Charlene Henderson L filed again. And then a very nice gentleman named Ben Copeland. His website looks awful liberal, but that's not a shock. That's Charlotte. And then you got the districts. Okay, the most competitive district in Charlotte's going to be District 6. That's Stephanie Hand versus Tarek Bakari. Now, that's important for the North Mech area, and let me tell you why. As you well know, the CRTPO, which is the group that makes the funding decisions for the region, they vote 40% of the votes come out of Charlotte. Another 40 come out of Mecklenburg County, and the remainder come from the local municipalities around the area who are part of CRTPO. We've got to have somebody like Tarek working with Ed Driggs in the city council for Charlotte to be a voice for the region, because Tarek is not just a Republican in Charlotte, where I'm from, where I live. He is also an incredible advocate statewide for the city, helping make sure the city gets what it needs. And that's just a function of who he is and how good of a job he's done. So we've got to make sure that he stays there. So if you are interested, if you've got no races in your local part of the world and you're interested in supporting a good Republican in North Carolina, please give to Tarek Bakari. And you got, of course, after that, you've got your towns, right? So we'll run down them just alphabetically. Town of Cornelius, we're going to have a mayor's race. Dennis Bilodeau and Woody Washam. That is going to be the first time we've had a competitive mayor's race in this city since 2007.
Wow. It's been that long?
Jeff Tart, when he first ran, had a competitive race.
Wow.
Yeah, because he was in his 3rd term when he ran from 11 to 12 when he ran for Senate. So it's the first time really competitive race since 2007. And then you've got a big list already for Town of Cornelius board: Robert Carney, Colin Firk, Scott Higgins, Susan Johnson. Scott was on the park board. Susan was on the planning board. Mike Miltich, former commissioner, running again. Mike Osborne, Thurman Ross, former commissioner, and Todd Sansbury.
And that's fully at large, right?
That's all at large. Yeah. There are no districts there. So it's going to be first 4 past they post. So I don't think, it's going to be wild. We haven't had a really competitive, we had a really competitive candidate race in the town of Cornelius last time, but that was all about development.
Right.
Well, they voted for a tax increase. So that's going to be, it's a small one, and it was part of the revenue neutral package. They went 1 cent over revenue neutral. It's going to be interesting to see if that's an issue. Yeah. Transportation is going to be an issue. This board has been more controlled on development, but they have turned. It's going to be interesting to see. I think this vote for this industrial development park over off Bailey Road is going to be a real bellwether for how this board views jobs. And I have to put a plug in for that because I'm an industrial developer's kid. Vote for that project. Vote for that project. There are jobs in Cornelius that could be here, middle income jobs, and there's no reason not to put that there. And I get that some people want to see a park and all this other stuff. With all due respect, that's an industrial part of the world. That's where that should go. Yeah. And I think to a certain extent, there's got to be some movement there. But I have no vested interest in that at all, luckily. So I just want to see him do well. Town of Cornelius, Rusty Knox, fantastic mayor. He and I are, he's a Democrat, God bless him, but he is just a great guy. Just a fabulous mayor, does a great job up there. Really holds the line against the city of Charlotte on the things that matter. You got the town of Davidson commissioners; those have already filed, and then you go to Huntersville. Oh boy, oh boy, it's going to be wild. Stacey Phillips is not running again. Got some other folks not running. Derek Partey's already filed for mayor. Stacey you got to understand the Phillips dynasty, man. Yeah. There was a little dynasty for the Phillips family down there for years. Danny Phillips, 8 years on the board, drops off. Daughter goes on. Daughter does a fabulous job. She's became mayor pro tem. that's now Stacey is going to be, not running again. And it's, you've got some good folks who've already filed. Derek Partee, who I personally really think the world of, is running. I'm certain there'll be some others who run for that because Melinda Bales is running for House because John Bradford's running for Treasurer. So that's going to be happening this fall.
Yeah, we actually left that out when we talked about
we didn't talk
state.
About,
we didn't talk about that.
But I mean, that's God, you got so many council state races, and I hate to say it, once you get past governor, lieutenant governor, it's hard to.
Yeah,
but John Bradford, our local guy running for treasurer, you got to support him. And then after that, in Huntersville, if you want to talk, and you and I are in the development business. I'm a development attorney. I work for property developers. You work for property developers. There has been no town more difficult to do business in than Huntersville.
Yeah. And trust me, I have experienced it on multiple different occasions. It really, and to be fair, Cornelius is a tough nut to crack.
It's become that way, but that's only in the last 2 years.
Right.
Up until 2 years ago, I mean, from a commercial perspective.
Yeah.
Like residential, I get the residential.
I always get residential.
I always get residential. I understand why you're concerned about it. But if you're dealing with commerce and you're dealing with jobs, you're talking about bringing jobs to a community, you don't ever want to turn down that.
No.
But now we're having a hard time. And I felt it when I was working on a client trying to get a larger breakup piece done, and we were able to split it up and put a larger project on it. And we were able to get that accomplished. But I'm going to tell you, my dad, I grew up in this area, Certex, the Certex facility down there. My family developed and built that. He will never come up here again.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who will not come up here because they have a problem with the town of Huntersville. And it's not from a niceness perspective. They're all perfectly nice. They all perfectly, wonderful. But Jack Semino, God bless him, he does a great job. Anthony Roberts is doing a great job. But their ordinances are tough. And we've got to get through the ordinances because the ordinances are not business friendly.
Yeah.
And it's not the fault of any of the staff, and it's not the fault of any of the town board members or mayor, but the ordinances are difficult.
Yes.
Because nobody... When you're talking about water retention, all the rest of that, it just makes it really hard. And then for those who are not in North Mecklenburg, it's not as big a deal, but Matthews, Mint Hill, Pineville, they've all got races, but that school board race is really the most important one.
Yeah.
And if there's someone from North Mech that we can all kind of focus on to get into the school board at large, it's absolutely necessary because our schools, as we talked about earlier in the show, it's a disaster.
Yeah. And, and moving on up into, moving up on up 77, Mooresville, obviously, its race coming up. Longtime Mayor Miles Atkins not seeking re-election, had announced back in January that he was going to seek re-election, but changed his mind. They've had two candidates have filed for that. Former Senator and Mooresville Town Council member Chris Carney has filed for that, as well as longtime Commissioner at Large Bobby Compton. So that is going to be an interesting race because that's when we talk about Mooresville, you talk about the east side and the west side of Mooresville. That's a true east versus west situation.
That's going to be, yeah.
That is because Bobby Compton, born bred Mooresville, worked for the town of Mooresville, has served in Mooresville, and is east side Mooresville High School, and then Chris Carney, who represented Ward 4, the west side of Mooresville for a long time, represented Mooresville and Iredell County in the Senate. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch, very much. And then we've had Bobby Commissioner Compton vacating his seat is obviously anytime there's an open seat, people gonna run. So there's been 3 candidates that have filed into that. Commissioner Eddie Dingler in Ward 1 has filed. Commissioner Thurman Houston in Ward 2 has filed. Currently, both them running unopposed, which is good. But both all solid representatives inside of Mooresville have done a great job up there. If you move on up into Statesville, Kevin Sullivan has filed inside of the Ward 1 area. Frederick Foster has done in the Ward 6 area, I believe it is, but nobody currently has filed against them. Inside the town of Troutman, that'll be an interesting one. Mooresville Graded School District also, there's only been 2 folks. Those are at large. Only 2 folks currently
I always
have
forget
filed.
that Mooresville's dual school district is separate from Iredell County.
Yes, it is. Its own separate school district. And brother, that's the way they like it. That's the way we like it, my friend. Mooresville Graded School District, fantastic school district. My kids went through
it's
there.
It's like one of the top school districts in the state, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And so is Iredell County. Iredell County, if you're in Iredell County, you can't go wrong inside of either school district. Great ones. And then you've got, obviously, town of Troutman right now, town council that had 3 folks file for that. Haven't seen a mayor file just yet. Really hoping T. Ross Young files again. Has been a fantastic mayor up there in Troutman. And then, obviously you'll have Statesville. But, it's going to be interesting time locally. It seems that, growth and development, the singular issues, they continue to be seen on the ballot.
It's amazing to me how we have found this NIMBY mentality has just really settled in into both parties.
It has.
You know, and it's a nonpartisan issue at this point.
It is.
And you know what the problem is, and this is the one thing that I continue to say, well, don't blame your locals for your traffic issues.
Right.
Like they've got to approve development. Because if you don't approve development, it's just going to pass you by.
Yeah.
We're about to get to a place where the system's going to slow down. You'll start begging for development.
Well, and that's the thing about it is that, and one of the things that I've always tried to explain is when people say no more, and it tends to generally come right after they've got their house.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that it's no more. Exactly.
You pull the signs up right after
exactly
you get your house.
Exactly.
That's
Close the door. But what's interesting is like, you know, inflation has been a huge issue for people. Well, nothing costs today what it cost 10 years ago. That includes your garbage pickup. That includes maintaining your streets. That includes your water and sewer and your services. Those things cost more. And if you don't have people in there helping pay the bill, who then ultimately bring companies and commercial who want you to shop there, which people precede industry.
That's right.
That's the way it happens. Unless you want to, the only way then to fund those things that cost more after you've lived there for a few years is to raise your taxes.
Yeah, your taxes are going to go up if we don't approve commercial development.
Exactly. And so, and without the additional development, guess what doesn't go up as high as you want? Your property values.
That's right.
So I get it. So yes, you have to sit an extra cycle at the red light. Yes, maybe you have to sit a little bit longer on 150 trying to get into Lowe's. But brother, would you rather your taxes be higher?
I don't think these folks get that though.
Yeah, no, as a general rule, no. But Larry, this has been a blast.
Yes, sir.
Really
I love
appreciate the opportunity for you being on here and speaking to us about local politics. Everyone tune in next week for another edition of We're Just Saying on WSIC News Radio. Have a great weekend.
Thank you all. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.